Hey everyone, welcome to week 2 of MC 305. I just want to encourage you guys that you are doing a wonderful job on the assignments that I've looked at so far, as well as the discussion post. So great job everyone, really proud of the progress we're making, and I look forward to the second week of modules. So this video is going to cover chapter 2, part 1, which addresses the current media landscape and an overview of writing professions. We all know that the media landscape is changing, mostly because of convergence in media, where demand for quality content is at an all-time high. For example, a small website social media platform, Barstool Sports, was originally valued close to $100,000 because they were a very small operation. Today, Barstool Sports is valued at over $100 million. Why? Because they produce a lot of content across a lot of different platforms. You can think about this in terms of Netflix, for instance, who has a higher content budget for producing new content than even ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and even like premium channels like HBO. So they are putting in money to generate new content, which is great for us as media professionals because that means our jobs are in high demand. In addition, the relationship between advertisers and media giants are not as strong anymore. Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, all of the social media giants are really making a lot of their advertising proprietary and very controlled. This is especially true with Google. And so advertisers are starting to create their own communities in order to maintain control over their own content. This is kind of the Airbnb model, right? Or the Uber model, where you take a traditional business model and flip it, where you have less reliance on an organization and put more of the control in the hands of your consumers, just like Airbnb does. In addition, the media landscape is more heavily relying on targeting audiences through demographics and very specific searches, which comes from an understanding of analytics. As media professionals, it is increasingly important that we understand analytic reports like the one I generated from the right, and understanding what those analytics truly mean. In addition, there's a greater focus on video and a need for live and interactive content. Live video is becoming one of the fastest growing ways to reach audiences. And so therefore it's critical that we understand how multimedia storytelling works. And finally, there's obviously a heavy reliance on social media, no matter what industry you're going into. For instance, journalists actually report getting almost 80% of their stories from social media now. And so whether you're using it as an information source or creating content for social media, an understanding of social media and the ways that it works is increasingly important. How can you win in this changing media landscape as things change seemingly from day to day? Well, the basics are pretty much the same. You need to be a great storyteller, which means having increased writing skills and an understanding of how to tell stories in multiple ways. So it's really those who can convey information to audiences whenever the audience wants it, wherever they want it, and make sure that your information and your messages are customizable for each individual person. And so this class is going to go over some basic skills on how to do these things. And that's really the primary goal of this class, is to teach you how to be flexible within this changing media landscape so that you will be more successful in your professional careers. How can you be successful as a media professional? Well, within the changing media landscape, it's really important that you understand about consolidated ownership. There are top brands like Apple, Google, Microsoft, et cetera, that really control a large portion of the media landscape. in broadcasting, there are 5 to 6 different companies that own the majority of news stations around the country. And they also own a lot of newspapers, radio stations, et cetera. And so understanding this consolidated ownership is important because you need to know what entity you would want to work for. And this is true no matter what organization or what type of writing career you're really going into. There typically are very few owners. And so you have to be able to understand those owners and what they want. We also need to be flexible as media professionals. We have seen the landscape change so rapidly, even from the time that I was in industry till now. I don't even recognize a newsroom when I walk into it a lot of times because it has changed so much from what even I was doing 5 years ago. So being able to be flexible and adapting to new ways of doing things is absolutely critical. And that follows for understanding the economics as well. While journalism used to be primarily just a public service, we really need to start thinking about news as a product. We have to be thinking about it in terms of sales and economics because that's the only way that the journalism industry is going to survive. That involves understanding the numbers. And what I mean by this is understanding those analytics, understanding ratings, understanding where your money comes from, and then adapting your work so that you are generating those numbers while still producing informative and helpful and ethical content. You also need to make yourself stand out in the industry. There are so few jobs in journalism now that really making yourself as attractive in your resume and CV as possible is absolutely critical. This is also true of PR and advertising, where it's one of the fastest growing professions, which means a lot of people are also going into it. So you need to be competitive with your skills, both hard and soft. Some of the hard skills that you can start building is learning basic coding. HTML and JavaScript, even C++ are great computer coding languages that you can start learning. And even if you're not interested in building websites, it allows you to have a skill that may be adapted in the changing media environment. For instance, when I was working at UAB Medicine, I was in internal communications, meaning I was just communicating with the employees, but one of my responsibilities was to produce a newsletter. And in order to produce this newsletter, I had to understand HTML coding. And thankfully, I had that skill under my belt, but the hiring manager at UAB Medicine said that one of the reasons that I got the job out of 500 applicants for my position was because I knew HTML. So these are small skills that can really help you stand out in the crowd. In addition, analytics is increasingly important to understand. I think we all need to be understanding what these social media measures really mean, as well as digital and email measures. And finally, we can make ourselves stand out by knowing emerging technology. I currently am studying drone usage, VR, AR, 360-degree video, and a lot of new technology that makes me stand out within the academic industry as well as within the media landscape. And, you know, even having a drone license to actually fly drones really makes you a valuable member of a media team that may need that skill either now or in the future. So you need to be considering those skills that will help you stand out. We also need to be able to produce high quality content. And this means knowing videography, knowing how to do podcasting well, and really being able to do all of these things across all the various platforms. If you think you're going into magazines and all you're going to be doing is print that print publication, you're in for a world of hurt, because every journalist, whether working for a print newspaper, magazine, broadcast television, radio, whatever, has to be able to produce for their media platform, but also for social, digital, and a wide landscape of things. And this is also true with PR and advertising. But the real keys to success for media professionals have not changed. It has always been that media professionals need to be skilled professional writers. It's what makes us stand out in the crowd. We need to be able to know how to select interesting topics and tell them in a compelling, entertaining, and informative way. We also need to have accuracy in any media job, and we need to be able to do it quickly. So these are also some of the key skills that I'm hoping to provide you within this class environment. So what are the jobs and industries that are available to you as a media professional? One of them is journalism. And I really believe that journalism is falling under a large umbrella now, where even if you're a print journalist, you have to know how to do broadcasting. If you're in broadcasting, you need to know how to do digital. So while your textbook separates these out as separate professions, I really think of them as having some of the same key skills, but there are some unique differences that you need to be aware of. You know, there's really a resiliency in the print press. People have been calling for the death of newspapers since the 1980s, and yet thanks to their integration of online technology, a lot of newspapers have survived. Sure, the landscape looks a lot different than it did back in 1980, but print newspapers can still be successful, especially those that focus on specialized communities or local topics. But print and digital journalists need to be able to produce content 24/7. And they need to be able to understand digital ad revenues and how those can help their journalism platform. I wanted to mention that your textbook talks about comment sections as a way that journalists need to control their work. But it's important to note that within the past few years, I guess since your textbook was published, that many comment sections are being deleted because they're being seen as not helpful and inciting a lot of hate and discriminatory speech. So ignore that section of your textbook. It's a little outdated. In addition, you have to be able to know how to produce content on social media as a journalist. It's just critically important that you understand concepts of social media when working for any form of journalism. Broadcast is really a large term that covers any non-print journalism. I actually tend to include digital journalism within broadcasting as well, but that's not highly agreed upon in the industry. But journalism in the broadcast field just means that you're a multimedia journalist. It means that you have to tell stories in many different ways using technology. It's typically a visual and auditory storytelling meaning that you have to connect pictures and sound to whatever you're doing. Now, within broadcasting, there are various market sizes. For instance, Nielsen, Nielsen, actually has 210 markets that range from New York City all the way down to, you know, small little towns in Alaska that barely have any people in them. And those market sizes have drastic differences in what kind of news operations you would be working for. So even if you're not super interested in working for local TV, that usually has to be the first place that you start in journalism. And so you need to start considering what market sizes you might want to work for. I tend to suggest for entry-level positions that you look between markets 75 and 200 for your first position, and look through those cities and see what areas you might be interested in. There are also national broadcast stations available, but again, these can be very challenging to break into for your first career. So typically you will work in a local market for a number of years and then transfer to a national station once you kind of make it. The same is true for cable, but there are many independent broadcasts, especially in radio, podcasting, and mobile technologies that allow you to work at a national level. and not be a local journalist. Again, there is an increasing focus on being able to produce content 24/7, especially in broadcasting, as well as integrating digital and social media technologies within your work. So what kind of jobs are available in these industries? For print and digital, you have your typical reporter. This is someone who would go out and write stories. And there are many different types of reporters, but there are very few beats left in reporting. Unless you're working for a specialized publication, you're typically a general assignment reporter, meaning that one day you may be covering politics, the next you may be covering lifestyle. It's pretty rare in journalism now for you to have a particular beat that you cover all the time. So you have to be flexible and adaptable. The only exception to that is if you want to be an investigative journalist or a data journalist. Those tend to be a little more specialized fields. You also have a photojournalist in print and digital, and particularly for digital mediums, this can also include videography. These are the people that take the images that go alongside the story. And a lot of times the reporter also has to be a photojournalist. There's editorial, which is opinion writing. Columnists are people in the print field who have the same amount of allotted space and they get to talk about different topics every day. And then an editor is someone who oversees the production of the paper. A copy editor is going to be someone who looks at the grammar and the writing to ensure that the copy is accurate. They may do a lot of fact checking. They'll also look for grammar and writing style. There are also digital editors, producers, and designers. And so these are some of the large fields or careers that you can go into within print and digital journalism. Broadcast journalism is very similar. They're just called different things. So you have your reporters who go out in the field day to day. You may also hear them referred to as MMJs, which are multimedia journalists. And an MMJ typically is a one-man band, meaning that they are both reporter and videographer and editor. So you have to wear a lot of hats as an MMJ. Probably the most well-known job in broadcasting is as an anchor or host. However, these jobs are pretty rare at the entry level. Typically, you have to work as a reporter for a number of years before you'll be considered for an anchor position. There are videographer positions where you are only a videographer. These tend to be a little more common than just being a reporter now, because videographers are always in need to go pick up different stories that may not need a full reporter devoted to them. In addition, you have a producer. This is the person that oversees the newscast as a whole. If you love writing, I highly recommend being a producer because you'll write about 30 to 50 stories a day, where a reporter might only write 1 to 3. Digital producers are in charge of the website and social media content. They are very similar to a newscast producer, except they're working in the digital space. Managers for broadcasting are called news directors or assistant news directors, and these are the people that help control the news agenda of the organization, as well as a lot of the management of the employees. An assignment editor is someone who takes all of the stories that come into the station and then passes them out to the reporters and producers. They're the ones also who are checking call logs, listening to scanners for breaking news and things like that. Some broadcast stations still have space for people who are only editors. Their only job is to edit either video or the audio tracks for the show, but this is becoming increasingly rare as well, because a lot of times that falls either on the videographer, the reporter, or the producer to do. So these jobs are starting to be eliminated somewhat, but they do still exist, and they are very valuable positions when you can find them. Also, you can be a director or work in production. These are the people that get the newscast on air, and they are very critical people, but they are not typically considered journalists because they are not gathering information. So your textbook is also a little outdated on the salary ranges. And in fact, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics actually is a little outdated as well. Their last analysis was in 2018. So in 2018, the median pay for a journalist, regardless of type of media, was $43,000 per year. And I will tell you, for an entry level position, you're really looking closer to 30 or 35,000 a year. And so broadcast journalists tend to get paid more, but not at the lower markets. It's going to vary quite a bit between, what you would make in market 100 versus market 5. So that's why it's important for you to look at those Nielsen ratings of the cities to know which market size you really want to go into. Public relations and advertising is another great media profession for you to look into. Again, I think these fields are converging quite a bit. So if you do public relations or media relations, you may also be expected to do advertising and strategic communications. Strategic communication tends to use both of the ideas of PR and advertising in order to work for a particular brand. But again, it is listed in your textbook as a separate career. It just uses a lot of the same skills, which is why I've combined them here. Now, public relations and media relations is considered the fastest growing industry in America. The primary job of a PR professional is to influence opinion, manage relationships, and manage the media. A lot of times in public relations and media relations, you're also having to do a lot of crisis management. We've seen this a lot where a certain scandal hits and then you have to have PR come in and manage the crisis and bring the brand or organization back into favor with the public. You can do PR and media relations in any industry. I know a very popular desire for students is to go into sports or music. That is possible, although PR and media relations jobs in those fields are very competitive. So you may have to start out in another industry and then move your way into those fields. Writing, especially for multi-platforms, is critically important in PR and media relations. Most of PR is writing, even though a lot of times people think it's about client relationships and planning and things like that. There definitely is that, but your day-to-day work is writing, press releases, statements, speeches, things like that. And so you need to make sure that you're taking a PR writing class if you're interested in this to build up your portfolio and your writing skills. In addition, it's great to have design in PR because you will be doing a lot of graphics, a lot of press releases and media kits, things like that. Analytics are becoming increasingly important in this field, understanding what your social media measures mean, understanding your digital returns. All of these things are key skills for public relations. You can also work in PR or media relations either for a company or a firm. So if you're working for a firm, your PR firm is going to take in clients, usually smaller clients who don't have the budget to have their own PR professional devoted solely to that company. So you'll be working for a lot of different companies if you work for a firm, whereas if you're working as an internal public relations or media relations specialist, then you are working solely for that company and just doing a lot of things for that one organization. The same is true for advertising. You can either work for internal companies for advertising, or more likely you will be working for a firm who take in a lot of different clients. There is still good job growth currently in the market for advertising, although it's not as much as PR. The key difference between advertising and public relations is that you're really persuading an audience to take an action, which is typically purchasing whatever product you're trying to sell. Understanding demographics and targeting is really important for this, which means you have to be able to understand analytics, You have to be able to write specifically copy for ads, and you need to understand kind of the multimedia aspect of advertising, which does include some design and usually videography. It's good to have a marketing and business background for advertising, primarily because even if you're a creative person, you need to know what sells. And so understanding the numbers is really important in advertising. So what jobs are available in these fields? For PR, you're going to have directors and managers who are kind of the leaders of a PR field or a PR operation, usually a firm, or if you are working for an internal company, you may have an entire public relations department, depending upon the size of the operation. And so the director and manager really oversees all of the work that's being done. The need for content creators is very large within public relations and media relations. And I should say that usually in PR, especially if you're working for a company rather than a firm, you're going to be doing all of these positions at once rather than just having one person devoted to all of this. But these are typically the careers available to PR professionals. Media relations is critically important as well. This is someone who tries to get their organization or company seen in the media. That might be holding press conferences, putting out press releases, just trying to get as much media coverage for their organization as possible. Also, creating content for social media and managing those social media channels for your company or client are really important. Community relations is working with the audience at large, as well as the surrounding communities that the business is in. And internal communications, which is something I did at UAB Medicine, is actually speaking to the organization's employees. So I was mentioning like the newsletter that I put out. I also have the responsibility of working on an intranet, which is a website that only employees can access. You can also be a spokesperson, although this is typically not a full-time career, but this is one way that you can join an organization as like a spokesperson who would go and speak to the media or speak during press conferences. Crisis and reputation management rather is also becoming an increasingly important career within PR and media relations. For advertising, you're going to have your director or manager, again, same thing as PR. You have your accounts manager, and this is the person that goes out and gets clients for the firm. They're the ones who are working with the business that you are advertising for and really ensuring that those people are happy. So a lot of account management is business oriented. A brand or product manager is really going to understand the voice of that company or whatever product you're trying to sell. So there's a lot of research that goes into brand and product management, as well as an understanding of how creative can boost that. Creatives are usually the ones who are doing the actual ads, such as graphic design, videography, copywriting, and those are important skills. A lot of advertising and marketing have crossover because you have to understand how to market your company when you are advertising. So there's a lot of crossover in those fields. Also, having someone who works with the media to purchase airtime, commercials, you have to plan and you have to have traffic operations, which primarily just means that you're ensuring that your commercial spots are hitting when they need to, et cetera. And a growing field for advertising as well as PR is actually going into research. And this is a really fascinating career for me. I would love to go into PR and advertising research because you get to work with the public and kind of be the person that gives information and statistics to your organization that gives them information for them to make better campaigns and advertisements based on that information. And again, all of these things are also done within the field of strategic communication. So a PR specialist typically makes about 61,000 per year. Again, this is high. If you're in the entry level, you're looking closer at maybe between 35 and 45 for an entry level position. But employment for public relations is growing. And so hopefully as the opportunities grow, the wages will as well. Advertisers tend to make the most money. This number is super high. Yes, there are advertisers who make 6 figures, but honestly, that is probably after 5 or 10 years with an agency or an organization. Again, I think advertisers will make the most money out of the careers that we've talked about, but you're probably looking closer at 45 to 60 for more of those entry level positions. So a question I often get asked by students, given that I have gone through grad school and given the amount of teaching and advising that I have done, is should I go to grad school? And it really does depend upon what you're hoping to do. If you're trying to get your MBA, which is usually what my students are asking me, the answer is yes, only if you're interested in the business side of things, if you're interested in marketing, if you want to work with numbers, analytics, and stats, or if you're really looking to go into upper management quickly. The only other reason that you should go to grad school, in my opinion, is if you want to teach at the collegiate level. And then you will most likely need to get a PhD, a doctorate like I am. If you are considering graduate school, please let me know, because there are specific things that we need to do to get you ready for grad school, as opposed to getting you ready for a career field. But overall, I do not recommend grad school straight out of your undergrad, primarily because most entry-level positions in media require 3 to 5 years of experience. Yes, you read that right. An entry-level position typically requires you to have a lot of professional experience. That means you need a portfolio. It means you need internships, even in your undergraduate career. And it's really a ladder system where you have to work your way up the ladder, and it's very rare to jump to the top without work experience. So I encourage you to consider going back to school once you have put in those 3 to 5 years to increase your chances of getting hired for management. But the most important thing is to get experience under your belt. I also think you'll be more successful in grad school if you understand the industry that you're hoping to go into. The other question I get asked is law school right for me? And I think that law school has this idea of prestige and just being this penultimate thing that if you have a law degree, that companies will just want to hire you. And I really think that this is a misnomer. It's not really accurate within the media field. The only reasons that you should go to law school, in my opinion, are if you want to practice law. So if you want to be a lawyer, then yes, you should go to law school. Or if you're interested in helping media clients with contracts. If you need to understand contracts, then you need to go to law school. Unless you want to do one of these two things, again, in my opinion, I don't think law school is the best choice. Law school is also something that I think you need to be thinking about now. It's very difficult to go back after you've been in the industry to go back into law school. So if you feel like you might want to practice law or you might want to do contract work, it's usually better to go to law school straight out of undergrad. But again, I encourage you to talk to your advisors about this or talk to me personally about your career goals, because these are decisions that are very important. I actually did a semester of law school because I thought I wanted to go into First Amendment law. And it was not a good experience. So please know that my advice is colored by my own experience. But I think that I didn't fully understand what law school would do for me and what it really meant. So be sure to reach out to different people and ask them before making those decisions about your careers. So up next, I want you to participate in the discussion post on professional writing. And then we'll do our homework assignment, which will be exploring some of these different professions and things that you might want to go into. And finally, you can watch the video about AP style and grammar on essential and non-essential clauses.